Alright guys, sorry it's been a while. I've been working on some music videos over the past few weeks. I'm slowly putting together, and I will be uploading them to my YouTube channel in due course. But unfortunately, over the last week or so, there's been a terrible, tragic situation on my wife's side with one of the members of her family, or rather adopted family, and I've had to, try and do my bit to support her and help the family with the funeral arrangements and things like that. So I've been quite busy, really. And that's really the subject for today's video is mortality and death overall. Sorry about the background noises here. I've got the window open to keep the air cool, but you might hear some background noise, and I'm sorry if you do. Yeah, I've been to a fair few funerals at this point. And it's never easy. They're always difficult things to get through, regardless of whether you're the family or not. Attending a funeral of what is essentially an extended family member is a tricky situation to be in, because funerals are difficult anyway. It's always difficult dealing with somebody's grief and the various emotional ups and downs that come with that, and the state of shock that people are often in. I'm not going to go into too much of the details surrounding the person who passed away recently's death. But I'll just say that it was a very unfair and tragic situation all around, really. And, as a husband of a Thai woman who has an adopted family in another part of the province, not too far away from here, that she sees fairly regularly. I felt morally obliged to do what I could to, at least for the sake of my wife, but I also just felt a sense of obligation to the family, really, because I don't think I could. I always feel that to not go would be somehow being disrespectful, really. I mean, it's not, nobody forced me to go. Nobody said that I had to go, but I just felt that it was the right thing to do. But of course, as anyone that ever has been to a funeral knows, it's difficult, because there are a lot of things that run through your own head about your own family, and if it's not your own family that's a member that's deceased, and it's tricky navigating those kind of situations, because you've obviously got your own thoughts and your own, if you're a bit sensitive like I am, then you're obviously dealing with your own your own emotions, and you can feel it. You can feel the weight of the situation, the gravity of the emotional atmosphere that you're in, and it's difficult. It is very difficult to see other people upset and clearly devastated by a loss that shouldn't have happened. And dealing with the reality of losing someone to at a relatively young age from something that I think should have a cure by now. That's all I'll say about it. But and it's just devastating. It's if you are empathic, if you've got any kind of ethical nature to you or any kind of compassionate side of you, then you are going to feel certain things. You are going to see the pain, the hurt, the sadness behind people's eyes. You do see it, and you don't really want to, but you can't help it. It's just there. It's on display. It's written all over people's faces. It's in people's body language. And you can't avoid it. You're surrounded by it, and somehow you have to try to keep your own composure in that situation when you feel sorry for them, and I genuinely do, and did at the funeral, and do now, and will for some time, and it's sad. It's very, very sad. It's just a very difficult situation to be in when you're not the direct family, because you don't know what to say, you don't really know what to do, and especially when you're navigating an entirely different culture as well, in which they deal with mortality in a different way, in some ways, and especially when it comes to Buddhist traditions, and so you're having to, you're trying your best to be as respectful and honourable as you can. You're trying to be polite and well mannered and well behaved and as respectful as you can possibly be. But it's tricky, because there are things that happen that you might not necessarily agree with. There are certain habits, behaviours, traditions, even cultural expectations or normalities that happen that you might not feel necessarily moral or appropriate. And that's difficult to deal with as a foreigner in a different country, because you don't really have any right to, and certainly in a situation like a funeral, you certainly, it's certainly wise to keep your mouth closed. And, I wouldn't dream of ever saying, don't do this, don't do that. It's not my place to. But you do think about things. You obviously you'll observe, and you can't help but see that certain things that the family does, you might not necessarily agree with. You might feel that it's somehow been disrespectful or maybe even immoral in some way. And so it's difficult, because, you have your own cultural conditioning actively going on in your own mind, and that gives you your own sort of ideas on morality and what is ethical, what isn't, what is appropriate, what isn't in a situation where a family's just lost somebody, and a kind person at that. It's one thing to lose anyone that's close to you, but it's especially difficult when it's someone that's relatively young, and the lead up to that sad premature passing was very difficult and extremely taxing on not only the individual concerned, but like the family as well, having to watch that, that gradual deterioration of that person, physically, psychologically, emotionally, maybe even spiritually, maybe even. And it's devastating. It must be really, yeah. And having lost somebody myself just a few years ago, sort of kind of in a similar way. As I say, thankfully, I mean, I was glad that I didn't have to see my uncle deteriorate, but sometimes I regret not being able to see him before he passed away. I wish I could have seen him one last time, but it's difficult because sometimes you don't want, you want to remember people in better times and when they were healthy, and sometimes you do wonder whether you're being selfish, and also you do have to think about what that person might want as well. I'm guessing they probably don't want to see you they don't want you to see them in that way. And sometimes you have to respect other people's wishes, even though it might hurt you and it might not be what you wanted. And that's the same thing with funerals, really. You have to respect that things are happening in a different way to how you might have approached things, or how you might like things to be. And sometimes you just have to kind of, just go along with it, really, even though part of your kind of conscience is saying, you shouldn't be doing this, really. This is not. But you have to, you have to realize that your perceptions are based on your own upbringing and your parents and your grandparents and just your overall cultural upbringing and the way that your society works, and how that often kind of, it kind of builds paints a picture of what you deem to be an acceptable way of doing things or not doing things. There were certain things that happened at the funeral that, as much as I respect that it's their culture and their right to do things as they see fit because it's their family member, internally, I didn't say any of this stuff, but I was thinking to myself, this just seems a bit wrong to me. This seems a bit kind of hollow, a bit shallow, a bit kind of, just a bit inappropriate, just a bit kind of, it's just not what I would do. It's not how I would have dealt with it. It's not something I would have done, because I would have felt that I was doing something wrong. But different cultures have different perceptions on how to respect the deceased and their views on spirituality or religious beliefs. These things vary from culture to culture and even family to family, I suppose, in many ways. And so it's difficult at times to see things that you feel you deem to be kind of immoral, really, or at least just kind of distasteful, really. It just kind of makes you wonder. Because the reality of funerals is that, as much as I hate to say it, is, a funeral is really, in some ways, a bit of a selfish thing, sort of. But I get the idea of wanting closure and sort of coming to an acceptance and the psychological elements that come with a funeral, and why that's important to let go of the body and to pay one's respects and to have the ability to do the honourable thing and turn up and pay your respects to the family during such a situation, and I think that's a good thing. But the fact the funeral isn't really for the deceased, because the deceased, that person's passed away or is gone, depending on whatever your views are on mortality. Or they've transitioned, or they've gone somewhere else. I don't know. I don't have the answers to those things. I don't know. But whatever the case, the funeral certainly isn't for that individual, because that individual doesn't, in terms of the things that made that person who they were, that those things, they no longer exist anymore. You know, the physical body has deteriorated. You know, the mind has stopped working, the heart has stopped, and so everything that made that person's personality, their character, their idiosyncrasies, and the nuanced parts of who they were, that those things are gone. You know, and they take their memories and their regrets, their life lessons, their ups and downs, their story with them. Whether that means that they pass on to another realm or another plane of existence, I don't know. Whether, you know, I guess it depends on what you believe in. You know, some people think that you reincarnate in some way. Some people believe that you exist somehow in another realm, another plane of existence, or that you come back again somehow at some point in some way. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a particularly religious person. I think we all like to believe, and we all like to believe in hope. We all like to think that there's a possibility of there being something else after this life. And who doesn't want to believe that? You know? Who truly wants to believe that the person that they deeply cared about or deeply loved and had known for years or decades has passed away, has gone. And I don't think anybody really wants to really sit with that, because I think it's just too difficult. We're not really cut out to believe in death and the halt to everything, the end of something. I don't think we really have the ability to truly grapple with that fully. And so it doesn't surprise me that some people rely on religion and philosophy and various forms of spirituality and various other means of coping and dealing with impermanence and loss and the sheer devastation of emotional devastation that comes with that, with having to potentially accept that person that you knew is gone forever, and that you'll never see them again, you'll never hear from them again. And that's an extremely, extremely difficult thing for people to come to terms with. I'm not saying necessarily that that's actually the case. I don't know. But part of me thinks that it could be. I mean, I like to think that I'm an agnostic, but there are times when I think to myself, maybe that is it. Maybe that it's just that is it. That when you pass on, if you like, or whatever word you want to use to soften the reality of it, to make it easier to talk about, that's it. That when your heart stops, when your brain doesn't work anymore, that's it. That's the end of you. That's the end of your existence, and there will be nothing else after that. Now, that doesn't particularly fill me with any kind of joy or happiness, trust me. But I do think that it's important to not live in denial and to confront reality head on, really, at least as you see it. And I, for the most part, I think see it like that when I die, that's it. That's the end of me. That's everything, and there will be nothing else. And while I don't really want that to be true, that's what my gut instinct tells me. That's what my rational, logical part of my brain says, that there's no more emotions, there's no more thoughts, there's no more memory making, there's no more happiness, there's no more joy, there's no more anything. that's it. It's lights off. It's, you know, it's forever. And, you know, the weird thing is that it doesn't really frighten me, actually, because you're not aware of it, or at least as far as we know, anyway. So it doesn't frighten me. I'm not scared of death. I'm not scared of dying. Yeah, I've kind of come to terms with my own mortality. I know it's going to happen at some point. But I'm not thrilled about it either. You know, I'm not thrilled by the prospect of never seeing my family again and never seeing an ocean again, or being at the top of a mountain, or feeling the wind in your hair, or, you know, the small joys of life, the things that make life joyful and beautiful. It's, you know, I don't want to die, but you don't have any choice. And, you know, when you're at a funeral, you come to terms with these kind of things. You know, it makes you reflect, even though you don't really want to, because it's not really the right time, but inevitably you do reflect on your own mortality and that of your own mother, your own father, your own siblings, your remaining family. And it does make you realise the things that matter in life. And that family do matter, because they're the only thing you've got. And one day it will be your father, it will be your mother, it will be you or one of your siblings, or whoever goes first. You know, it will be you lying in that coffin. It will be you getting buried or getting cremated, and again, you know, that doesn't. There's no sense of, you know, I'm not happy about that being the and you know, the inevitable outcome of my life, but no one said there's any that there was ever any guarantee of a long life, or any guarantee that you would live forever or anything. You know, it's you know, that's why I understand that some people want to believe in an afterlife and reincarnation, because I think it's easier to tolerate the idea of death when you think about it like that. It's easier to live with that, knowing, or at least convincing yourself that life will go on in some way or other. But I just don't really think that that's true. I don't think that is what happens. I think, you know, it's like cutting off a branch of a tree. It's like it dies, you know. It's like killing an insect. It dies. It's gone. It's finished. You know, it's like turning off an electric supply. You know, the power to something. It's gone. You know, that's it. It's over. It's done. And that's frightening. It's scary to a lot of people to really, 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 truly want to have to deal with that. You know, at the funeral, you know, I thought about my own parents, and, you know, I saw the remaining family members there. You know, the sister, the daughter, the husband of the deceased, and it was really emotional. It was really upsetting. It was really genuinely heartbreaking to see it, to see people that have just lost someone at a relatively young age through a horrible disease, and it was just really sad. It was just really, really sad. It was And I think probably maybe for the first time in my life, and maybe the first funeral in which I kind of really felt the true gravity of everything. And it's weird because having been to several funerals now at this point, with family and family of my wife and people I knew, friends I've known, I suppose the gravity of the situation has never really truly hit me until this recent one, because I've never been to, apart from one funeral, a funeral that really shouldn't have happened at this point. You know, the individual concerned should have had probably another 30, 40 years ahead of her. But it just wasn't to be. You know, the situation that she was in was it just compromised her immune system to such an extent that it just couldn't fight it anymore, and the body essentially just unfortunately just couldn't take it anymore. If you just give me a moment, I'm just going to clean the window. I'm going to close the window because there's a lot of noise. Just typical when I'm trying to record something. I think funerals are just very difficult things for kind of everybody, really, but for different reasons. You know, obviously, it's the most challenging time for anybody that was close to that person to probably ever have to go through. But as someone that wasn't directly close, there are other elements to it that make it difficult, because, you know, it's one thing to be invited to a funeral in your own country as a extended family member or distant family member or distant relative kind of thing, or just because you're married to someone and you kind of feel a sense of obligation to go or whatever. But I mean, I wanted to go anyway. It was something that I felt that was I didn't feel conflicted in any way about it. I was going to go anywhere. You know, nobody had to tell me to go, or you know, it was just something that I automatically knew was the right thing to do, and so that's what I did. But it was a difficult day because, you know, I was dealing with the family up close, like in such a situation as that. And seeing people, a side of people that you don't usually get to see, is kind of a strange thing as well, because, you know, people tend to, I think for the most part, a lot of people deal with difficult, you know, complex emotions sort of relatively well most of the time, because they can cope with a lot of things, and the circumstances sort of kind of call for you to keep composure of yourself and maintain self-control of your thoughts and emotions. But when it's in a context of a funeral, it's a different situation, because it's a time where you're allowed, you know, you're given permission to grieve. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to be visibly upset. You are allowed to break emotionally. But as someone that's not directly related to the family, it's and if you're someone that's already carrying a lot of emotional trauma and baggage, and having dealt with my own grief not so long ago, and, you know, dealing with a lot of personal problems as well, and mental health problems, and just, you know, a tricky existence at the best of times, it's difficult. And it's also difficult because you don't want to overstep, you don't want to cross any kind of boundaries. You don't want to say anything that could be deemed as inappropriate or even sort of offensive, unintentionally offensive or anything. So it's difficult to know what to say and to do in these kind of situations, really. You want to say the right thing, you want to do the right thing, but it's tricky because it's a different culture, and so you don't always know what the right thing, what is right, what isn't right. So you can only do what you think is the best. You can only try to be as well behaved as you can and to be as honourable and respectful to the families as members as you possibly can. That's all you can really do at the end of the day. Besides that, there's nothing you really can do. There's nothing you really can say. And actually, sometimes, the more that you think about it, the more you might end up doing something that you, even though you have the best of intentions, might not come across the right way. There were times where I wanted to give the daughter and the husband, a hug, and just to kind of give them a brief, the moment that I'm thinking about them, and I feel sorry for them, and I do care about them. But it might have come across as shallow or inappropriate or somehow crossing a line or something, so I didn't do it. I wanted to do it because, I just felt that it was something, my own little way of giving them a moment of peace, I guess, a moment of, I feel sorry for you, and I want you to know that I do care, and while there's nothing I can do about the situation, just know that there are people thinking about you. I might not be able to necessarily do anything, but at least I can. I don't know, it's tricky, isn't it? Because you don't want to come across as being superficial in any way. You don't want to come across as being fake or two-faced or false, and it's really difficult, really, really, really difficult sometimes knowing what to do. I think it's fair to say that nobody enjoys going to a funeral, and I certainly don't. I don't like seeing people upset because it kind of makes me upset in some ways. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, just that it is upsetting seeing people that you like upset. And when you don't normally see that, it can be a bit of a it's hard to know how to describe it, really. You don't see that side of people very often. Thankfully, we don't, because it's too heart-wrenching. It's too raw to deal with, I think, and that's why people so often try to avoid expressing themselves, and especially guys. There was a lot of male family members there at the funeral, and extended family members there, and I could see that they were struggling to keep it together. Some of them were obviously extremely upset about the fact that this was essentially the last day that they were going to get to see the coffin and get to see the individual herself, because they have an open casket element towards the end of the service. And on that point, actually, as I said just a few minutes ago about, sort of not wanting to overstep the mark or do anything that could be deemed as being highly inappropriate. There was an opportunity where, and there's no easy way to say this, really, but there was a part of the funeral where the family was with the fairness. I don't know what you would call it. It's a cremation fairness thing. I don't know what the actual name of it is, but the family have the opportunity to see the individual one last time, and then they get the opportunity to then place their deceased loved one into the cremation furnace with the help of the employed individual there at the temple that's being given that duty to do so. And there was a point where the family was there, and and my wife kind of said, you can come if you want to, but I just couldn't do it. I just didn't feel. I didn't really want that to be a last image of that person for me personally. It was. I could see from a distance. I could see her. I mean, I was quite close, but not close enough to actually see her face or anything. I just didn't want to do that. I didn't think that was right for me to do that, so I didn't do that. I stood back from probably it must have been a good metre and a half away, probably maybe 2 meters. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it might be a bit more than that, and I could see the person's hands, and that was enough. That was more than enough for me. I mean, really, I probably shouldn't have even really been there, really. And it was just upsetting. It really was upsetting. I just found it got to me. There were a couple of moments throughout the funeral that really got to me. There was the procession around the I don't know what you call it. There's this part of the temple where they keep the coffin, the casket there for a while, where they lay her to rest until the end of the funeral service. I can't think of what the name of it is off the top of my head. Well, it's a specifically designed Buddhist. It's like a kind of like a sort of like a chapel type thing, sort of. But it's difficult to describe. I can't think of what it's called. So I'm not even going to try. But basically, they remove part of the Buddhist ceremony, funeral ceremony, if you want to call it that, or tradition, or procedure, usually, as far as the family is concerned, is to remove is to place the coffin out, to remove the coffin from the monks, sort of like resting the monks chanting area. They have a specific area where they place the coffin for the days that lead up to the actual funeral, and then the family then removes the coffin themselves and places it into like I don't know what we would call it, like a kind of like a sort of like a chariot of sorts, kind of thing. And so they move this. Then everyone, all the family, all the close family, then push that around this. They move the coffin into the chariot. Then they move the coffin around this specific area 3 times. And while it was, I was a bit behind the family for a number of reasons, really. One, I didn't think it was right for me to be close to the coffin, so I stood back because of that. But also because I think part of me knew I was going to get emotional, so I didn't want the family to see that. And I didn't think it would have been appropriate as well. And so there was just a point where we was walking around, and I just snapped emotionally. I just couldn't keep it together anymore. I tried my best to try to keep my composure, but it was just too moving. It was really moving, and it was really difficult. And after that, it was kind of okay for a while. And then they actually had the funeral service, and there were certain parts of the funeral service that I felt were kind of a bit kind of excessive, really, if I'm being honest with you. But that's how they do things here. It's not really my right to sit and criticise or judge. But that's there's certain aspects of the Buddhist service and ceremony that were certainly, a very different way of doing things. Compared to how funerals typically occur in the UK, and it's difficult. It's tricky to deal with, to have to tolerate certain things like that, because you have your own ideas and your own views on how things should be done, morally speaking, in a funeral. But anyway, that's whatever, that's how things are here, and I just have to accept that. But it's difficult not to have your own conflicted emotions and thoughts about certain moments. And so throughout most of the funeral service, I kind of just about managed to keep it together. There was a lot of things running through my head, a lot of emotions, and it wasn't just, it was obviously a lot. I felt extremely sorry for the family, and seeing everybody obviously trying to keep it together, and the sadness in everyone's eyes, and just how heartbroken everybody was and is. And I just found that sad. I just found it very sad. But for the most part, I kept it together just about throughout most of it. But that part at the end, again, when everyone was saying their final goodbyes, and the coffin was then placed into the cremation furnace inside that, I don't know what it's called, but like that area of that part of the temple where they cremate the deceased. There's no easy way to say it. There's no easy way around saying that. That's just what it is. And yeah, that got to me. That definitely got to me, because that was really the moment where I think probably the real true gravity of the situation really started kicking in, I think. Because everyone realised then that was the last time that they would ever see her. And yeah, just the weight of that whole couple of minutes was just really sad. It was really, really sad. Really, really, really upsetting to see the family distraught like that. And it was really difficult to see people that I don't normally see upset, in tears, and it was really, really moving at times. I've got to be honest with you. And so, the funeral obviously came to an end, and we all kind of said our goodbyes, and we all went our separate ways, and on the way home, I was just kind of thinking, really, like, how ironic the whole kind of thing is, that the whole kind of concept of a funeral, really. A daughter saying goodbye to her mother, and just seeing everybody on their best behaviour, and everyone being polite and nice and kind. And I just kind of felt that it was, wouldn't it be nice if people could be like that all the time? You shouldn't have to take someone's passing for people to be nice to each other, for people to be respectful. and for human decency to be on show. It shouldn't have to take someone's passing for that to be reality. But it often is, it's often tragedies and funerals and environmental disasters or major unfortunate events that bring people together. And it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't have to take tragedy for people to just try and be decent to one another. Put our differences aside. We don't all have to necessarily like each other, but we should at least try to be honourable and respectful. And while maybe that there is an element of the whole funeral situation of the family kind of tolerating people being there, probably including myself to some extent. They didn't. I suppose that there was no obligation for me to be there. I didn't have to be there, but I just did it because I had spent time with this individual. I had even travelled with her. We even went to Hong Kong with her at one time, and we travelled together in Thailand. And so I did. It's not like I didn't know her. It's not like I never saw her or anything. And I always liked her. She was a really lovely individual, and she'll be greatly missed. And it's just very sad. It's very, very sad what happened to her. It's a real shame. It genuinely is very unfortunate, and it just shouldn't have happened. And like I said, my heart goes out to the family. It really does. It really, really does. But I've done my duty, I guess, and that's all. Maybe I guess the family expects. That's all. That's all you can do. I've done my bit just as much as the family has in some senses, because everyone turned up to the funeral and did their bit. I placed a flower on the coffin, and I took part in the Buddhist traditions to a certain extent, and I did what I felt was right, and that was to do one of the most respectable things that you can do for someone, and that's to pay your respects and to honour their life and to be there, to be there for the family in some way. I didn't know what else I could do. I wanted to, as a man, I wanted to be able to do something practical or pragmatic, but there were just times in life where you are helpless, and where you aren't able to provide any real, truly deep sense of support in any way. It's like nothing I can do. I can't. I want to, but I can't. And I think a lot of the people that were there felt like that. It's like, sure, I'm sure you probably had a few people at the funeral that were just there to get whatever they could out. If there's any free gifts or any food or whatever, you're always going to get people like that, unfortunately. You're always going to get those that are there just purely out of a sense of not wanting to feel guilty for not going. And I suppose, if I'm being honest, maybe there was an element of that in myself as well. But I did feel that I did feel like I had to be there. It's the same thing when another member of my wife's family, adopted family, passed away. I think it might have been last year. I can't quite remember now. It might even have been earlier this year or last year. I can't remember. But there was just a sense that a moral conscience type thing. It was just like, I just think there are times where you just have to do something. You don't think about it. You just do it because it's the right thing to do. It doesn't matter about what you want or what you think. It's about sometimes you have to be you do have to be caring and understanding and think about others at times. And it's important that you have that kind of attitude, because it's not always about yourself. It's not always about what you want or what you feel or what you think, especially when it comes to bereavement. It is about putting your differences aside and sometimes tolerating people that you might not necessarily, you don't necessarily dislike, but you just don't really know them that well, or you're kind of feeling different towards people for some reason or other because you just don't really know them. And don't forget there are cultural differences as well, and societal differences between the UK and Thailand, and obviously not being able to speak Thai to any real great proficiency, that causes barriers, language barriers, obviously. I mean, I can speak Thai to a certain extent, but I certainly can't have any real deep discussions on it. I mean, not that I don't think that a lot of Thai people necessarily like to do that anyway, but for the most part, unless it's talking about politics or something like that, but I think for the most part, they're trying to avoid doing those kind of things. You see, the culture in Thailand is very much about, there's a lot of passivity, there's a lot of sort of laid back attitude towards a lot of things. And I understand it, I get it. I don't think it's wrong necessarily, but it might not always be useful, but that's the way it is here. And again, sometimes you have to just keep your mouth shut and just kind of play along with things. And certainly at a funeral, you don't have any right to be slagging off anyone or any aspects of the culture. It's just that that would be absolutely abhorrent and just wrong for all sorts of reasons, all sorts of levels. So you just don't do things like that. It's obvious. It goes without saying. It's common sense. So it's just one of those things that sometimes you just have to be present, really, more than anything else. It's just about being present. It's just about showing that you cared and that you do care, even though you might not necessarily be able to really do anything that could change their lives or give them any sort of real comfort or real sense of peace or, I don't know, whatever. Sometimes I think it's just nice for the family to see you there, because it means that you respect them. You respect that person that's passed away, and you respect the family. And that's really all that matters, I think, in the end. As someone that's not a blood relative, all that matters is that you, in a sense, kind of share in their grief in some way without. What I mean by that is I don't mean it in any kind of selfish, narcissistic way or anything like that, or manipulative way. I don't mean it in that way. I mean it like, there's an honor in that. There's an honor in being able to, have self-respect and composure, but also, be able to show and express a bit of your own emotion. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong in that. It's not about you're not making anything about yourself. It's just that you're affected by the atmosphere. You're affected by the true weight of everything that's going on around you, and seeing the emotional scars of what's happened and what's going on. And I feel things like that. And I think a lot of people do. They just don't say it. They not everybody, not everyone's like that, but it's I think it's probably one of the greatest things that you can ever do for someone. The greatest honours, really, for not just for the family, but for yourself as well, because it proves that you've got something about you. It proves that you've got some self-respect and that you respect other people. It doesn't mean that you always have to agree with them, that you always have to like them, or you always have to align with them on everything, or that or even that you necessarily like them. But in a at a funeral, it's a time to, quell any kind of petty troubles and differences and things like that. It's not the time for it. There are, it's probably not the time for it ever anywhere when you're in a different culture. It's like you can have your own opinions in private. You can have your own opinions with your own family if you want to, but it's about finding a balance and dealing with things as sensitively as you can and as best as you can. That's all you can do. So, sometimes you just have to play your part, and sometimes it might not always be very meaningful or impactful, but that's all you can do, but at least you can say you tried, at least you can say you did something. I just, all I can say is, that I hope that she rests in peace, and I'm glad that she's not in any suffering anymore, she's not in pain anymore. And while it's obviously devastating and rightfully so for the family to be heartbroken, and it's going to take a long time for them to deal with this, at least the only consolation is that she's not suffering anymore. And what else can you say, really? I wish the family, I wish them peace, I wish them solitude and comfort at this time, and you've just got to give them the time to bereave and to go through the different forms and the ups and downs of grief and the complexity of it all. And it will take probably a few years for the West and the West of the shock and the grief to deal with and manage. And that's essentially all you can really do eventually. It's just to try to manage it. The shock will dissipate over time, but there'll always be a hole there. There'll always be something missing. Because I've had that with people that I loved and care about in my family. When my grandmother died, my grandfather died, my uncle died, even certain pets I had when they passed away, and I don't think you ever really truly do get over. People like to say, I got over it. It's like, I don't think you do ever really get over grief. I think it's something that you live with for the rest of your life, because they're always with you in some way. That they are a part of you in some sense. And I think that you have to carry their legacy, their memories with you, because that's what they would have wanted. And that's all you can do in the end. That's keep their name alive, keep their stories alive, and don't but also live your own life as well. I think it's so important that you have the opportunities to, yes, deal with the grief and everything that comes with that. But also, I think at some point you also have to go and live your own life as well. And that doesn't mean that you forget about that person. It means that you have to, at some point, you have to have a life. You have to have something of normality. There's no way you can live in that constant state of grief forever, because you'd be hanging by a rope. You just can't. You can't live your entire life like that, because either you'll end up on drugs, addicted to alcohol, or you'll end up dead yourself. You can't. You've got to. Eventually, you have to find a way to manage that pain, and that's what it is, and that is pain that you will carry with you throughout whatever's left of your own life. Because before you know it, people will be going to your funeral. And I think that's important. It's not that you don't care. It's not that you're cold or insensitive or heartless or anything. It's just that there comes a point where, yes, you have to sort of kind of make them immortal in your own mind. But you can't just grieve 24/7 forever. You can't. Life is something that must be lived. It's something that it's so fleeting. It's so quick. And we just take it for granted every day that we wake up, that we've got another day, another week, another month, another year, another decade ahead of us, and we don't know that for sure. None of us know what's left on the timer. And the worst thing to do is to waste it away, thinking that you've got more time than you probably do. Sure, some of us might reach old age, but there's absolutely no guarantee of that. There's no guarantee of tomorrow's. I don't know how long my parents have got left, how long my siblings have got left, how long I've got left, how long my wife's got left, or how long my pets have got. I don't know the answer to that. But I know that there is a point where they will cease to exist, just as much as I will. And that is a reality, and that's what funerals cement in you. They make you truly come to terms with the fact that time is running out. That the people that you care about and love aren't going to be here forever. And it's a wake-up call, and it's a realisation that you haven't got time to sit around wasting. You must try and find happiness and try to find something to give you a reason to be happy, a reason to get up in the morning and to do something worthwhile with your life. And I'm not saying that that's always easy, but it's better than sitting on your deathbed with regrets that you didn't appreciate life enough, that you didn't do enough with your life, that you took it for granted. And we're all guilty of it. We are all guilty of it. I've done it myself. I've done enough of that myself over the years. But there comes a point where you have to smell the coffee. You really do have to look outside your window and see the small, beautiful things in life. The trees moving, the birds singing, children laughing, families having fun together. It doesn't all have to be bleak and miserable and dark all the time. There are certainly a lot of aspects of life that aren't pleasant, a lot of realities that aren't nice to grapple with or to accept. But there are fleeting moments, there are things about life that are great, that are wonderful. And again, it shouldn't have to take death for you to acknowledge that or to really open your eyes to the world, but often it does. Because we get used to life, the daily grind of everything, the monotonous nature of getting up and, whatever it is you're doing, going to work, doing something, the same old things day in, day out, the same old faces, the same kind of conversations, whatever. But one day you'll miss that. You'll miss those people. You'll miss those conversations. You'll miss that repetitive predictability. You'll miss that stability, because it'll be gone and you won't get it back. And with each passing member of your family, something of yourself will go with them. A part of you dies with that person, because you're connected to them. There's a connection to people that goes when they pass away, that you don't get to, as far as I know anyway, probably don't ever get to speak to them again or ever get to see them again. You don't get to build any more memories with them. You don't get to do the things that you plan to do with them. You don't get to have heart-to-heart moments. You don't get to laugh with them anymore. And that's a tragedy. That's a real terrible finality to life. And that's why you must find something to make life bearable, to make life worth living for. Whether that's your job, your career, your kids, your wife, your pets, money even to a certain extent. Some project you're working on, improving yourself in some way. Because life's fucking short, man. It's really short. How many people are dying, are facing a terminal illness that they didn't think that they would have a year ago, 5 years ago, whatever. How many people are dying today that thought they had another 20, 40, 50, 60 years ahead of them? How many children are dying today? How many young adults are dying today from various diseases, illnesses? Nobody thinks that they're going to really truly die. Nobody ever really truly believes it, because I don't think you can. You don't want to believe it, do you? You don't want to believe that you're going to be lying in a box, motionless one day, that you're going to be reduced to bones or to ash if you get cremated. These are disturbing realities and difficult, dark realities that nobody really ever wants to talk about, but are true and are things that are going to happen to each and every one of us. And the sooner that you really face that head on is probably the moment that you start to really truly live your life. Or it bloody well damn well should be. Because the clock's ticking.